Patko Mafani conversation Thursday. It has just gone after 5. My name is Patko Mafani. What a pleasure this afternoon to be hosting Judge Graham Moshoana. Okay, and every time I mention the surname of Judge Graham Moshoana, a lot of people ask me questions, and one of those questions is he related to Lawrence Moshoana? Chief, good afternoon and a warm welcome. Thank you for agreeing to have a conversation with me here this afternoon, particularly during the COVID lockdown, a difficult period for South Africa. But thanks for agreeing to be with us.
Thank you very much, Chief, and thank you for allowing me to be hosted by you in this show.
Yeah, it looks like we have a little bit of internet connection challenges. You can hear me, Chief? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yes, Chief. So you were saying?
No, I was saying thank you very much for hosting me, and I am happy to be on your show.
Thank you so much. And I think let me ask this question. It's the first time that I get to host you. You and I come a long way, and you know, during our spare time, we sometimes meet at the golf range or at the golf course and have a round of golf together. But I got to ask this question, you know, to the first public protector.
Yep. Are you now talking the relation between the two of us? Are you referring to that, Chief? Hello? Hello?
This Chief, yeah. You were saying?
Oh, yes. Are you referring to the relation between the two of us?
Yes.
Yeah, we are related. You know, the Moshoana clan or the Moshoanas, they originate from Tzaneen. And some of the Moshoanas had moved from Tzaneen to the area called Beggarsford or in the Limpopo area. So as a result of that, the area, the Beggarsford area is mainly paddies. And now the surname, if you observe, is spelled differently because it got influenced by the paddies. But there is a relation. Now and again, me and him, we talk. We call each other brothers. Yes, Chief?
Okay, that's interesting. That's interesting.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, amazing. Okay, and let's now get to our conversation today. Maybe you can take us through your journey as a passionate, number one, as a passionate lawyer, even before you became a judge. And by the way, congratulations, Chief. I've never had an opportunity to congratulate you on becoming or being appointed as a judge of the labor court in South Africa. Just on your journey professionally as a lawyer, your role models, your highlight as a labor law practitioner, even before we come to your court as a judge. Just take us through your journey.
Yes. Look, Chief, I want to start it at my teen age, and not necessarily being to be long-winded around it, but I think it is important to state that because my interest of becoming a lawyer.
Okay, Chief. I don't know if you got my question.
Yes,
There
I've
is
got.
a bit of network challenges. I'd love to apologize to people that are watching the show. It's such an important show to talk about
Yes,
law and talk about labor law and talk about the labor court and everything that happens during the time of COVID-19. And it's a kind of conversation that we're hoping we will be having here with Judge Graham Moshoana. Chief, I'm not sure if you can hear me now. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you loud and clear.
Hi, Chief.
Yes, you had disappeared for a long time.
We
Can you
back
hear
on
me?
air. I think there's something wrong with the internet
From your
connectivity on
side,
my side, and yeah,
yes.
yeah, I think it's on my side. One of the viewers is saying, don't panic, Patco, because you're sitting with a judge."
True, 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 true. Because soon you might be
and
sentenced.
and yeah, at least I will not be sentenced. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
And
indeed.
others were saying, yeah, and others were saying, Teta Judge, Upatko's asibambe endleleni. So it looks
Oh,
like at least while you were talking, they were following you. Yeah, it looks like
oh,
they were
okay.
following you.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's
yeah. So,
great.
Chief,
That's great.
we were talking about your exciting journey as a legal
Yes,
practitioner, from your
yes,
days as an attorney to your days as an advocate, and more so a labor relations lawyer before you
yeah,
became a judge, and that passion and your role models
yes,
in building up this wonderful career.
yep. Look, before we could lose connectivity, I was
Yeah.
about to say that I would rather want to start it at the time of my teenage, just on a brief level before I move to
Yes,
other levels.
correct.
I was born in an area called Palabora Namakhale in Limpopo. And at around the age of 14 or thereabout, I think I was in what is standard 8 now with the grade terms. I
Grade
can't share.
10
It's
now. Yeah,
grade
grade 10
10. It
now.
should be. Yeah,
Yeah.
that shows how archaic I am. Now at grade 10, then I developed an interest to become a lawyer one day, and that was around 84 or thereabout. Now, what made me to develop an interest to be a lawyer, of course, you would remember that during that time it was the dark days
Correct.
of the country. My mother, who was working at a shop, I think it was a retail shop, yes. One day she came back from work, I assumed at the time, and she told me that she got fired.
Hmm.
And at that time, a helpless young man as I was, I did not understand why did that happen. And I attempted to ask from the old lady what happened, and she just told me the madam says I must not come back. And out of that, aggrieved as I was, I had a sense of, but is this fair? You know? And that was a question that I was asking myself at that time, but not in a legal sense, but in a sense of just, is it fair for this to happen?
Yeah.
But fast forward, then I went to varsity, studied law, started my junior degree at the University of the North. At that time, it was called Terfluop.
Turf.
And
Yeah.
yeah, and then I moved to Wits to do my LLB. And during that time, when I was at Wits, of course, being a student activist as well, interacted largely with the unions that were operational under COSATU at the time. And and that's when I understood the concept of fairness, fair labor practice, and so on. Then the interest got heightened, and I said to myself that when I go and practice law, I'm going to practice law as a labor lawyer, because I had a sense that the workers of South Africa are being subjected to some unfairness. Of course, then I indeed practiced as a lawyer, and exclusively, I would say, my practice from 1995 up to and including 2016 was on labor law. And I was involved in a number of high profile cases which would involve individuals, and championed their rights, championed their cause, and until I decided that I have done that sufficiently, and I believe that I must be at the level of the bench, where then I would make sure that fairness as a concept in labor law is a reality, it's implemented through the courts, given our constitutional imperative. So in short, that's the journey.
Correct. Correct. And would you say, because it's very interesting what you've just mentioned now, in relation, number one, to having studied during the dark days of apartheid and practicing and crossing over to the democracy while you're practicing. And would you say that labor lawyers today, now that we're in the new democratic dispensation as a country, that labor lawyers today are having it, um, slightly or a bit more easier than the labor lawyers during the dark days of apartheid?
Look, now the labor lawyers are having, in my view, having it easier. The reason for that is that during the dark days, we did not have the constitution. And the Labor Relations Act that was applicable at the time was drawn up or adopted in 1956. Then you can imagine if it is adopted at that time, it does not have the constitutional imperatives that one would expect in the current labor law. So it was difficult and different from the current situation.
And I'm trying to imagine, you know, when a youngster gets to choose a career, sometimes there are role models, and I truly respect and I'm touched by the story of your mother who was dismissed unfairly, and this sort of planted a seed. But there might have been also lawyers you used to admire. Oh, that's much better. Yeah, that's much better.
Yeah, no, no.
I like
I
that.
just
Yeah,
realized that
yeah,
it
it
was
was getting
getting
too dark
darker.
there.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, much better, Chief. And if we could keep our eye line on the phone I mean, on your device
yeah.
all the time, you know.
Okay,
And and
great
and
stuff.
and I was coming to the point that when your mom was unfairly dismissed, it planted a seed, as I heard you correctly earlier on. And then along the way, you must have been inspired by some lawyers uh, who were conducting themselves, you know, in the craft in a manner that made, you know, the law profession to appeal to you, you know, and to be
Yes.
determined because they were inspiring you. Will you be able to recall your role
Yes.
models, to recall those lawyers that were there before, regardless
Yes.
of the fact that it was apartheid, but there were lawyers that
Yeah,
were shrewd and that were good at their work.
exactly. Look, the likes of our retired Deputy Chief Justice, Dikgang Moseneke, whom in later years, when I did my articles, I worked with briefly through the office of his younger brother. I was doing articles with Tiego Moseneke. So he's one of those. And then the other was the late Ismail Mohammed, who became the first, if I'm not mistaken, the Chief Justice of the of South Africa under the new dispensation, or just before the new dispensation. So those are people that I admired and said to myself that one day I would want to do exactly the same that they did, being to
Correct,
champion the human rights.
correct.
Yes.
And now that you're a judge, isn't your specialization and passion as a labor lawyer compromised? What is it that you're doing differently now from having represented people that were unfairly dismissed, and now that you're a judge? Isn't your original passion compromised?
Not necessarily. Actually, it is heightened in this manner. At the time when I was in practice, I would ordinarily persuade a judge to find in favor of my client. And of course, lawyers would bear testimony to this. It's not an easy thing to do, but depending on how difficult your case is. Now, this time around, I am at the level where I don't need to persuade anybody, but my sense of justice comes in handy. And I am in a position to say the law, as I understand it, applies this way. And that assists in the development of, of the people, generally in a constitutional democracy. So it did not compromise me. Of course, one can say somehow the compromise might be that you you don't write fees anymore like you would used to do when you in practice. But that's basically the only thing, because that goes to materiality. It's got nothing to do with the law per se. It is a business concept more than anything else.
My guest today on Patkuma Family Conversations, Judge Graham Moshoana, and we're going to be talking about COVID-19 and how the pandemic affects the courts, affects how the law is supposed to be applied, and all of that. If you've just joined us, a warm welcome to the conversations. It is 24 minutes past 5. A contribution, a question from Sabelo Hlanganisa, as you may see on your screen, Chief. He
Yeah.
says during apartheid, workers' rights were limited if they had rights at all, or based on the color of their skin, some were more protected than others. Have we got situations like that today? It may not be based on the color of the skin, but perhaps on whatever factors, be it political affiliation or whatever. Are there factors today that make others more protected than others?
Indeed, Chief, I would say that the situation is almost still the same, although this time around we're not talking apartheid, but we're talking access to justice. There are certain people that are unable to access a lawyer because the fees of lawyers may be exorbitant, and that person would be without justice when that person was supposed to have justice. So it's more a different struggle than what it used to be back in the apartheid era. So the situation has not changed, although we are faced with a different factors that affect the rights of the workers.
Different animal, probably no more apartheid, but the economics
Exactly.
of the country still probably oppress the black people not to be able to get justice because they cannot afford lawyers. Oh my word.
Yeah.
This comment, it's a generous comment, this one from Gladys Mulaudzi. Ari, unfair dismissal of mom at work created a desire to be in law. The story of Judge Graham Moshoana. And I want to move on to a sad time in South Africa and the world, and that's the time of the COVID-19, which everybody knows that COVID-19 affects almost all fields and all sectors in one way or the other. COVID-19, and number one, the legal fraternity and the lockdown levels. Are you able to work from home being a judge? Okay. And number two, the functioning of the courts, the social distancing, the risks associated with contacting or touching something, whether it is a document that the clerks of the court or a junior attorney would be taking to the judge, and you have paper moving from hand to hand. Just generally, Chief, the viability of the courts during COVID-19 lockdown.
True, Chief. I must say we are faced with a very serious challenge. Uncharted waters, uncharted territory. We have never been in this kind of a situation. The judiciary, the legislature, the executive, all of us are in darkness. We do not know whether we are going or we are coming. But the judiciary is also highly affected. We have to work from home. Justice that we're supposed to deliver is no longer easy to deliver because we rely on technology. Connectivity becomes one of the issues we've just witnessed with this discussion. It becomes impossible to reach, for instance, the rural areas, the most downtrodden. We are unable to reach because they do not have data, they do not have all this connectivity that will ensure that they reach the judge. Of course, the judge, being a human being, is unable to go and operate at a court because of this pandemic. And because of the social distancing and all these restrictions that are with us now. And again, we always feel that we are compromised. We receive files that would have passed hands of a number of employees of the courts, from the registrar, from the clerk, from the attorney, from the clerk of the attorney delivering the document to court. Now, in order to avoid that, somehow we rely on electronic documentation. But again, as I say, it's a limitation because not all are in a position to make use of that technology. And for me, it affects the delivery of justice.
I'm trying to imagine, Chief, the situation in the courts, particularly from the people who love to go to court when they know that there's someone appearing to go and listen to the case. In sports today, there are no spectators. Yeah. Matches will play if they play, but there are no spectators. We've seen in the La Liga, we've seen in the English Premier League, they even superimpose the presence of supporters through speakers exactly. and sound effects and whatever. And in court, do you allow people to go sit there and the issues of social distancing now when you have a matter that you need to preside over and are there other people apart from the judge and the prosecutor and the defense and the accused? Are there other people? I've not been to court since the beginning of the lockdown, so I have no idea what's going on in court, during lockdown.
Look, it poses a challenge. In law, there's an old saying, old adage that says justice must not be done, but justice must be seen to be done. And that means that whenever there's a matter in court, members of the public must come in and listen and observe justice being dished out by the judges. Now, at the moment, social distancing do not allow certain number of people in courtrooms. And because we're no longer doing courtrooms, we are having a situation where we do it on Zoom application. And on Zoom application, it can only be those that are able to access the login details. Otherwise, members of the public do not know what is happening. There are many matters that we managed, of course, as the judiciary to resolve using the Zoom application. But until and unless a judgment is dished out, a member of the public would not know that at some stage the SABC and its employees were in court, or the SAB brewery and the union and its members were in court. They would not know until a written judgment is dished out. So that is a challenge.
My guest today is Judge Graham Moshoana, and we're talking about the challenges faced by the courts, the challenges faced by the judges during COVID-19 lockdown, and that's where we are today. I am failing to imagine a case or a matter being heard on Zoom. Where 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 would the accused be? Would the accused be in the physical court with the police and all these other people? Practically, just take us through practically on how it happens.
Look, for instance, I'll give an example. In the labor
Yes,
court, the judge president of the labor court has issued a directive that we will not be holding trials wherein people give evidence in a witness box because of this situation. Now, matters that are dealt with now are what we call motion matters. So, motion matters are largely decided on paper, and there is no testimony that is given orally. So, ordinarily in a Zoom application, it would be the judge, the representative of the one
accused.
party, and the representative of the other party,
Okay.
and it will be dealt with on those bases. But
Wow.
I cannot overemphasize the fact that this is a limitation. It's a
Yeah.
serious hamper.
Yeah. Yeah. And 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 Judge Mushwana, I think of the major disruptions that are coming with COVID-19 that we're facing today as a result of the pandemic are the employer and employee relationship implications or breakdown of relationships. And the world faces a major economic meltdown, and companies are not making profits. They're not making the money they should be making. While on the other hand, they have to balance that with paying salaries, which is another obligation, and sort of retain the jobs of their staff members. Are courts today faced with an increase on labor dispute matters because of this economic instability that came with COVID-19?
Yes, I am sure most of them, and some were on the electronic media. There has been, and talking for the labor court, there has been a number of judgments, one of which was the SAA and the business rescue practitioners. They were in court, and they said, look, we have to expedite retrenching a number of employees because of the pandemic. And those are issues that ought to be decided by us as judges to say, yes, we can understand the pandemic, but at the same time, we understand that businesses have to make money. And if they don't make money, they will have to retrench. That's the unfortunate part of it.
Absolutely. Correct. 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 Okay, let's just take an off ramp a little bit, and this off ramp is called education.
Yeah.
Your opinion on SATU? The union is up in arms again on what they call unfair labor environment to have the schools going on in the face of the alarming COVID-19 infections and deaths reaching unprecedented levels. In your view, much by demanding that government reviews the workplace, their workplace environment by closing schools.
Look, Chief, that's a catch-22, because now we have two interests to balance. The one interest is the interest of the education of the children. It is a right. in the Constitution. And the other interest is the health and safety of the workers, the teachers who have to dispense with education in order to ensure that the right to education, the basic right to education, is realized. Now, on the one hand, you cannot simply uh, ignore the fact that SATU is raising this complaint, and also not ignore the fact that the Department of Education says that the children cannot lose the academic year because of the pandemic, particularly when they believe that they have put in place measures that may avoid the risk that is attendant with the pandemic. Now, it is a matter that I think is going to grace our courtrooms very soon, particularly the labor court. Because there has been one matter where the department, one of the government department, the employees said, no, we can't put our life at risk, and we do not want to come to work. And the department had to bring some application to say, you are on strike, and your strike is not protected. So those are the issues that are definitely going to graze our court.
My guest is Judge Graham Moshoana today, and if you have a question, but not seeking for advice, because now he's a judge, so he no longer advises. But
exactly.
if you would love to understand anything, particularly relating to the legal fraternity, and he is here to assist you with your questions. From a court's point of view, Judge Moshoana, the courts in general, what does the future hold with COVID-19? As I'm one of those people who believe in a future with COVID-19, not a post-COVID-19 future. I don't think there's any future which we shall call a post-COVID. I think COVID-19 is here to stay. And so different sectors and fields and fraternities are bracing themselves for a future with COVID. In your view, what would the future look like from a court's point of view with COVID-19?
Chief, I wrote a judgment some 3-4 weeks back, and that judgment involved, it's a matter of public record now, the judgment is published. It involved the union, FAU, and the South African breweries. The central issue there was that South African breweries was wanting to retrench employees. And in terms of our law, Section 189 says that before you do that, you must consult the employees. Now, they could not consult because they can't sit in one room. They had to find means and ways of consulting. And the union, of course, took a view that they cannot consult over Zoom application. The employer, on the other hand, took a view that they will consult. That's the only appropriate means to consult, is to consult through the Zoom application. And my ruling, and it comes to your question, my ruling was that now we are faced with a new normal. And this COVID-19 situation, it is the new normal. It is something that we are going to be living with for a number of years to come, in my view. And the courts have prepared themselves on the basis that it has to operate on Zoom and limit itself to less and less contact. That is the future that holds for the judiciary.
Some things are quite tricky, and I'm trying to imagine the other people that assist the courts are the police.
Yeah.
And normally, and this was pre-COVID, a police official would escort the accused to the
Yes.
benches, and worse when the accused would be in chains, and they would even touch, sort of escort and assist and touch.
Yep.
There's kind of disruptions now with COVID-19, and particularly moving into a future with COVID-19. Do we see probably some of the staff members of the courts or court employees losing jobs because matters may be decided online, virtually?
Indeed. I mean, if matters are going to be decided online, and you think of this, a court orderly ordinarily will be one who would say rise in court. Now, in a Zoom application, there will be no rise. Now, if the future continues to be like that, to be like what it is now, then it would simply mean that that rise in court person will no longer be in a position to do the work. And that may lead to retrenchment of that person. So those are serious challenges. And a court official who would deliver document from one office to the other, that person might be without a job, because then we will be prioritizing electronic means of receiving documents. So those are serious challenges.
I got a question, and Joacha wants to take us back slightly, but within the context of the conversation, and asking, has the recognition of workers' rights made it difficult for employers to manage or even dismiss or retrench their workers? Just that recognition, and that's his question. You want to tackle that now?
Yes. Look, can I, because I want to improve the lighting. I'm actually sitting in another room, so I had not switched on my light because I can't move. If you can just give me 1 minute to just improve the lighting.
That's fine. That's fine. That's fine. That's fine. Judge Graham Moshoana is our guest today. We're going to allow him to sort himself out, and then when he's sorted, and then we bring him back. People watching, Natasha Tesh watching, Princess Batembo Vaha watching as well, Linda McLean watching from Cape Town, Kos Doyle is watching from East London. Thanks for watching, Kos. Amakhawe to Foundation on YouTube. We're going to come to the point that they are raising there, and I think Judge Moshoana is ready for us now. Much better, much better. Okay,
yep.
Great stuff. Okay, now I was just talking about the people that are watching, that have joined us on YouTube and Facebook, and from Amakhawe Foundation, there is a question or comment saying the parliamentarians don't want to go back to parliament, but are forcing children to go to school.
Yes.
Yeah, look, it's a comment from Amakhawe to Foundation, on these kind of things. Okay, so we I think we seem to agree, therefore, Judge Moshoana, that the future is never going to be the same, that the COVID-19 disruptions are a game changer and people might lose jobs. Apart from the officials, like the police in the courts, what else is likely to be compromised? Are there constitutionally, any law principles that might be compromised as well?
Look, you will remember there was a case that involved the South African Defence Force and the gentleman who was killed in Alexander. I think, yes, yeah. That matter went to court, and the family wanted some compensation because of the fact that they believe that the South African Defence Force had killed the gentleman. In that judgment, it's a very long judgment, and I'm not expecting anybody else who would want to read it. But in that judgment, a point is made that when the Disaster Management Act was passed, it limited a number of rights. The Bill of Rights says that I have a freedom of movement. I can go wherever I want to go. But the disaster management says you might not do certain things. The Disaster Management Act says, and the regulation, it says that you cannot be out in the streets by 9 o'clock. Now, those are limitations on the rights of individuals. And unfortunately, our own constitution does allow that in an open and democratic society, you can limit certain rights in order to. The main issue here is health and safety, and it overrides, as it were, some of the rights that we have. But in that judgment, back to that judgment, the judge who wrote that judgment, and I agree with, he said that there are certain rights that are not to be compromised. And those are listed in the Constitution, right to life and so on. Those, whether COVID or no COVID, those rights cannot be compromised. But with COVID, there are certain rights that are severely compromised.
Are there, and talking about rights, Judge Moshoana, are there rights that put you as a judge, and probably you could answer this question on behalf of all judges, maybe, that put
Yes.
you as a judge on the back foot in terms of contradictions with those rights, and then how do you find your way out? This one has a right to, and a fundamental right to this,
Yes.
and another one also has a right, which is enshrined in the Bill of Rights, in the Constitution of South Africa. And you find yourself, and you look at this matter, and you say, "Hey, but there's a contradiction here," and how do you then, decide and make a call on such a matter?
Look, it becomes difficult, but I will tell you that the Constitution, luckily, has a provision, which is Section 36, which says that if a judge is faced with a situation where there are competing rights, the right to this, which is limited by the other right. Now, the Constitution says that the test that we apply is to determine whether this limitation is it a limitation that is allowed in an open and democratic society. And if that limitation is allowed in an open and democratic society, then it will be advanced. But if my answer to the question is that no, this limitation is not it's not acceptable in an open and democratic society, that limitation will not succeed. It is for that reason that you would have heard or observed that there's a judgment by the Pretoria High Court where a judge had concluded that some of the regulations are unlawful and ought to be set aside. All of that was guided by the Constitution and also dovetailing, as it were, with Section 36. Is this limitation, am I, as a judge sitting, am I going to allow this? And if the answer is no, I can't because it's irrational, then the judge will strike it down.
Okay, okay, very interesting, Chief. And I just want to ask a question, particularly when it comes to the credibility and the ethical stand of a judge. Are judges outside of their work? Are judges by law allowed to have affiliations, whether they be religious or sporting or political? Are judges allowed to have a political affiliation? Are judges allowed to have a religious affiliation and any other affiliations that define a judge that is off duty from a fundamental human being point of view? Are judges allowed to have affiliations?
Let me answer this question this way, and it may sound a bit confusing and technical at the beginning, but it will become much more clearer later. A judge is appointed for life. So basically, you are a judge the moment you are appointed until you answer the call from the Almighty. So you are a judge everywhere and anywhere. Now, it is for that reason that judges are not supposed to hold a political affiliation, for instance. And judges are not supposed to express, as it were, certain views on societal matters. And I mean, lately there is an issue with our Chief Justice around the issue of Israel and Jerusalem and so and other areas. So although he had expressed it in a religious context, but there's a touch of politics that came in and all that. So being a judge, you're a judge for life, and you need to limit yourself in certain instances. However, coming back to the fact that you are a person, you are a born Mafani, if you're a judge, you have family that you interact with, you go to funerals, you go to weddings, you go to all these places. So you can hold a view, but ensure that at all times it is a balanced view. It's like, and I'm sure you can agree with this as a media person. There's always this view that when you report, you must report in a balanced and fair manner. So now, as judges, we find that following us in the context of societal interaction, belonging to a church, I can be a member of the church, but it could well be that I may not accept a position of being, for instance, a secretary of the church or the chairperson of the church, because the next thing the church is in court, I am in court. I have to recuse myself. So it becomes a catch-22 situation. But there is nothing except particularly in the act for the judges, political affiliation, that one is specifically excluded. But being a member of a church or a church choir or what, there's nothing wrong. The only thing is you need to look at your back at all times, which is not something very great. Yes.
And it probably would not be advisable that you accept a position in an executive committee, whether it's a religious affiliation and in a church, and they elect you and you serve in a committee, and you reckon that might sort of compromise the judge.
Yes, indeed.
Okay,
indeed.
Interesting.
It is not like it's unlawful. It is allowed, but The only thing is that you may be compromised when
Correct.
your church comes to court.
Correct.
Yes.
Well, Judge Moshoana, my guest today on Conversations, very, very enlightening conversation, very enriching discussion, particularly to young people who do dream to become a lawyer or who do dream to go up and become a magistrate and become a judge in a high court. And let's just talk about um, Judge Moshoana and his spare time, recreation wise, sports wise. We seldom, I must say this, we seldom meet judges at sports events or being directly involved in terms of playing sport and all of that. And how do you then relax? Your laptop is off, your gown is off,
Yes.
and everything, your
Yep.
briefcase is in the boot of the car. And how do you then relax?
Of course, as I said, and I want to emphasize this, judges are people, and judges are supposed to take part in activities that would make them, enjoy the life. Now, for Graham Moshoana, I'm an avid golfer. I also like soccer. I would go to the stadium and watch my favorite team when it plays, and be like any other fan and actually scream at the top of my lungs to make sure that the team scores. So
Would you would you say which teams you favor, you support?
yes, I don't think there's anything wrong in me saying that. I am a
Uh-huh.
Kaizer Chiefs supporter locally, and in English football, I support Arsenal, and in the La Ligas and all that, I support Barcelona.
And if Kaiser Chiefs had a labor dispute landing in your court, would you still be viewed as objective in handling that particular matter?
Look, in law, there's a principle that is called recusal. But because recusal, it's got its own principle. If, let's say, it's a matter that involves Kaizer Chiefs, and it's a matter that was close to me in terms of having given Kaizer Chiefs an advice or having said to Kaizer Chiefs, look, this thing must be dealt with this way, then I would have to recuse myself. But otherwise, simply because I'm a fan, I will declare to the parties and say, counsel for the opponent, as a person, I support Kaizer Chiefs as a team. I like their style of football and all that. And at that time, maybe we're fighting over rights of players and rights of employees within Kaizer Chiefs. I've got nothing to do with that.
Correct, correct. There's a comment which I think, or a question which I think might be the last one, looking at the
Yes.
time. And this is Sivu Ufagoka Nkana saying, since we're talking about rights and protection thereof, can a person be dismissed as a result of prolonged illness due to coronavirus? Would that not be discrimination? Any improvisation to balance demand to go to work and illness as a result of the pandemic? And I think he's reflecting on the major disruptions that the pandemic bring about. And I know that Judge Moshoana, you'd love to address this question.
Yes. No, indeed. Look, in terms of the Labor Relations Act, an employer would be able to dismiss an employee if there are three recognizable grounds. One, incapacity. Two, conduct. Three, operational requirements. Now, what the the viewer is talking about is that of incapacity. If you are ill
Correct.
for a long time, the employer can simply say, look, my business interests are compromised and you are incapable of performing the functions that I have employed you and paid you for. You will be entitled to the employer is entitled to dismiss you. Is it discrimination? No, it is not discrimination unless if the employer would say that I dismiss you not because you are incapable, but because you have this illness and you may somehow um, commune to other employees, and that reason is not a valid reason, then it means the employer is discriminating people with COVID as opposed to people without. And there has been such a case before of SAA and some other employee regarding HIV/AIDS. So if that is being used by the employer, that I don't employ people with COVID-19 because it's a communicable disease, and for some reason my employees would be affected. If there are no operational reasons, that will be discrimination, and it will be an unfair discrimination.
Wow. Wow. Judge Moshoana, thank you so much. I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart that you again agreed to sit with us and have this conversation. And it has opened my mind. And I hope also with a lot of people that are viewing the show on YouTube and Facebook live simultaneously, that they have been enlightened, that a lot of questions have been answered today. And of course, the unprecedented future and disruptions that COVID-19 has brought about, there is no doubt that all fields and all fraternities are badly affected. And thank you for even taking us through that journey, the journey to the future when it comes to COVID-19. We want to wish you all the best as well in your career. And again, thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And thank you to the viewers. Thank you.